acting chairman, until which time we get to item 4, which will be election of a new chair and vice chair. In the meantime, let's go right to public comment. I will just let you know that we did receive one electronic comment that was sent out to all the board members, so you should have that. Are there any other public comment? Anybody that's joined the call that would like to jump in at this point?
Just a note, interim chair. I think we need to do a roll call first.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Cynthia?
Cindy, your microphone is not working.
Can you hear me? Okay. Dave Mendiola,
Yes, I'm here.
Laura Fitzsimmons, Joni Eastley.
Here.
Laura's there.
Joni Eastley. Chris Giunciliani. Jeff Wells. Drew Christensen.
Here.
Rob Tells. Kate Thomas.
Here.
Bevan Lister. Commissioner Hall.
Present.
Allison Jaffe. Justice William Maupin. And Harriet Cummings.
She's going to join later.
Acting Chair Mendiola, Harriet Cummings will be a few minutes late, and I see there's a phone with a Vegas address that may be Chris that just joined.
Okay. So what we may do with, until Harriet gets here, we may hold off the election of chair and vice chair until she gets here. So when she does come in, if you want to just alert us, that would be great. And in the meantime, we'll probably just take it out of order. But next item of business is item number 3, approval of the January 26, 2022 minutes. And I'm assuming everybody's had a chance to review those. And if there are any comments or changes, please speak up now. Okay. If no changes, I will welcome a motion on that.
Move to approve.
Did you catch who that was? It was Kate. Thank you, Kate.
And this is
Yeah,
Laura
remember-
Fitzsimmons, I'll second.
So I got a first and a second. Laura was the second. Any questions about the motion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against? None, so it's unanimous. We'll move on now to item number 4. Actually, I think we'll hold off.
My apologies. Before we get too far, this is Rob Tellis. I'm the local number. My apologies. I've had technical difficulties.
Okay,
Just
can you
for the
hear now?
record, I'm here. Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, Rob, great, thank you. So we'll hold off on number 4 until we know if Harriet's joined us. So we'll go to number 5. And Tom, I think that's a review of the 4th monitoring report, 2nd quarterly county data report, and the oversight update. And I think you're going to take that, Tom.
Thanks, Chairman Diola. I just communicated with Professor Hanan, our Davis monitor, and we don't quite have the 4th monitor report yet. We've changed the timing just a little bit on those and pushed them back to allow us to finish our quarterly reports first, give those to her and have her kind of digest that and include it into her report. So we don't quite have that yet, but we will forward it and then include it in the, of course, the next board meeting. Second quarterly county data reports. So these are, this is the data that we're required to collect pursuant to the Davis settlement. It includes things like caseload, case type, time spent by attorneys, investigators, experts, dispositions of cases, how many trials there are, those kinds of things. We rolled out Legal Server last summer, and then people were required to start using it on October 1st of last year. So we continue to work out bugs and do all those things and get people kind of more and more using it. The first quarterly report was, a mixed bag. Some offices were doing really well. Some needed a lot of work. The second quarterly report is vastly improved, and also a lot of offices have gone back and updated their input from October 1st to December 31st as well. So the last two quarters look really good. Again, this is a big ship to turn from no reporting to uniform reporting across the state. And there's over 100 people, that we have to kind of coordinate in this. So we're overall really happy with the second quarterly reports, and those have been turned over to the monitor. Like we said, they're all up on the website. If you go to our website under reports, scroll down to the quarterly indigent data reports. I don't know if anybody's all that interested in that scintillating reading, but it does give us a lot of information moving forward, including with the combination of the weighted caseload study that will be here within a month or so. A lot of information about how many attorneys should be in all of these counties and offices and how many cases should be taking. So it's information for us to use in our budgeting and, with the legislature coming up, as well as our Davis compliance. So those are there for you to see. Again, we're really happy overall with the progress. Oversight update. So we're also required to do sort of boots on the ground oversight of indigent defense in all of the counties to make sure they're complying with the standards, with court rules, all of those kinds of things, not just the practitioners, but the system overall. One of our main goals for the beginning sort of this process is relationship building, trust building, and sort of getting everybody on board with our vision of reimagining what indigent defense can look like across the state. So to that end, Marcy and I have been traveling and we're trying to focus on mostly Davis counties first, and going out and meeting with county management, with the judiciary, both justice courts and district courts, and with the practitioners in this area. So those have been, it's just really, we almost forget over the last 2.5 years with everything being on Zoom, how valuable it is to just sit down in a room with people without like an agenda and just see where the conversation goes. We get a lot more information about how the system actually looks and what needs, course correction, as well as, like I said, establishing these really important, vital relationships with all the stakeholders in these counties. And so we have so far done oversight in Douglas, Esmeralda, Eureka, Humboldt, Lincoln, Lyon, Mineral, Nye, and White Pine. The rest of the Davis counties and the other ones are on our agenda for the next month to 6 weeks. So we hope to have all of that done for the end of the fiscal year. But again, that's going really well. That's one of the most positive things, I think, about our work right now is this relationship building that we're doing there. And then we create reports and give those to Professor Hanan as well at the end. Marcy, anything I'm forgetting here?
No, I think you covered it. It's just been really nice to be able to go out and touch base with people in person. You know, with our department being built in the middle of COVID, we didn't have that opportunity, but people are so nice and welcoming to us. So it's just nice to be able to see that. So we've had a really great time going out to the rurals and are looking forward to finishing up the rest of the counties.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions for Tom on this report from any of the board members? Or comments?
Mr. Mendiola,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to let you know that Harriet has joined and so has Bevan Lister.
Great. I saw that. Welcome, Commissioner and Harriet. So we kind of moved ahead of item 3 while we were waiting for Harriet to join. And now that she has, I'm going to go back to item 3, which is approval, or excuse me, item 4, approval of the board business. And first of all, to talk about the resignation of Ann Traum from the board. Of course, she was appointed a district judge and will no longer participate in this board. We really wish her the very best. She did an outstanding job. And so the next piece would be we need to open the floor to nominations for chairman to replace Ann Traum. So why don't I start there? Do we have any nominations for the chairmanship?
This is Laura Fitzsimmons. I would ask if it, unless I incur his wrath, I would nominate Dave Mendiola to be our chair.
Daggers are coming your way. No, I would be happy to do that. I've obviously
Thank you.
alerted to this fact. So.
I'll second Laura's motion.
All right, so we've got a first and a second to nominate me, Dave Mendiola, as your chair. So I'll, if there's not any questions, then I'll put it out there for a vote. All those in favor of Dave Mendiola as your new chair, please signify by an aye vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Let's move on to vice chair. I'll accept nominations at this time for vice chairman. And I would be happy to nominate Laura Fitzsimmons as our vice chair. How's that for getting back to you?
I'll second. Rob Tellis.
All right, Rob's got a second for us. So any questions about that? If not, let's hear a vote for Laura Fitzsimmons for vice chair. All those in favor signify by an aye vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Looks like that carries. Laura, congratulations and thank you. Appreciate it. So with that in mind, let's move on to item 6. And that's a bill draft submissions for discussion and possible action. And Marcy, I'll turn that over to you.
And Chair, if I could just take a moment, we all know that we did lose Ann Traum because of her appointment to the judiciary. However, we did gain Harriet Cummings, who is present for this meeting.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to let the board know that her spot has been filled. She is appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So her opening has been filled at this point. So going back to the bill draft submissions, I attached in the attachment some proposals. These are works in progress. We're open to any other ideas that anyone has of what we should be putting together. A little bit of deadlines are May 20th, the non-budgetary bill drafts are required to be submitted to the governor's finance office. And September 1st, anything regarding budgetary is due to be submitted. So to start it off, the first one that we're proposing is to make some changes to NRS 180.320. And this talks about the powers of this board. One problem, if you could recall a couple of years ago when we were building our budget, is there's a subsection that says that this board is supposed to review and approve the budget. That is inconsistent with NRS 353.205, which says that the budget is confidential until the governor transfers it on. So that was the issue that we had run into before, when we couldn't really have you approve it because I couldn't release it to the board. So what I'm asking is permission to modify the language in NRS 180.320, section 1, subsection F, to having the board review and approve the budget, to having the board make recommendations to the executive director concerning the budget for the department. This is consistent with the Board of Sentencing Commission, and it seems to comply with NRS 353.205. The next area that we would like to change in this is to create additional authority for this board, and that's to allow the board to set what that Indigent Defense Services hourly rate for court appearances, staff time, and other reasonable expenses. So in order to do this, we are recommending changes to NRS 180.320 subsection 4, and also to clarify this authority in NRS 7.125. So what that increase would say is the board shall adopt regulations to establish appointed indigent defense hourly rates for court appearances, staff time, and other reasonable expenses. And then going down, of course, in 7.125, which originally or currently reads that the rate is $125 per hour in death penalty cases and $100 per hour in all other cases. We want to add language that unless the rate is modified for indigent defense services providers by regulation of the Board on Indigent Defense Services as set forth in NRS 180.320 subsection 4. What we've learned when we've gone out and talked to a lot of individuals on our oversight is that the $100 per hour seems to need to be updated. And actually, the market is updating it. Lyon County has currently set the rates at $125 per hour for juvenile and misdemeanors, $150 per hour for felonies and gross misdemeanors, and $175 per hour for death penalty cases. Douglas County has followed suit with increasing the rate to $125 and $150. They haven't had a death penalty case, so they haven't negotiated that specifically. But it appears that the market is saying that that rate needs to be increased. And especially since it hasn't been increased in so long, now is the time to do it. In discussing with our office, we felt that it would be best to allow this board to create a regulation as to what the hourly rate should be, and allow the board the authority to allow for billing for staff time or other reasonable expenses. Other feedback that we've received is these independent attorneys don't have sufficient funding to be able to hire a secretary or another individual that might be able to do these performances or these duties at a lower rate. So allowing this board the ability to set separate set rates was the idea that we had. But of course, as always, we're open to any sort of feedback from the public and this board. And Chair Mendiola, I don't know if you want me to go through all of these or if you'd like to take each one for questioning. You're on mute.
Yeah, so I think it'd be better if we just took them one at a time and ask for any questions or comments first, and then we can kind of move on. So why don't we start there if you're done with that portion of it, Marcy?
Yes.
Okay. Looks like Laura's got her hand up. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. 25 years ago, those were the rates. And I was doing indigent defense in the rural counties 25 years ago. And you can't even support it with no, I'm just telling you, I'm shocked that it hasn't been raised. I'm shocked that people are still even able to keep their doors open at these rates. That's just my comment. My question, Marcy, is this something, I mean, because this is something that's somebody's gonna pay for it, right? So it's gonna be probably as part of, the underlying legislation, it's gonna come out of the state to supplement what the county's paying, because they're capped, right? Have you run this by anybody?
You
I
know,
mean, it's so important, but I just want to know if maybe we'll talk about it some other time.
yeah, and I think that the state is already picking up some of this. Like we've said, the market has increased the rate in several of the rural counties where they're actually contracting with certain individuals, not to be full-time attorneys, but they're just contracting with them to set a certain rate. So we're already seeing this happen. We're just responding to what we believe needs to happen. I think you're right. This rate hasn't been increased in a substantial period of time. 2003 was the last time that is increased. But we wanted to receive feedback from the board as to the appropriate way to proceed. Does the board feel that we should set the hourly rate within the statute and have the legislatures set that? Or would the board like to have the ability to have it be within the department so the department could respond, or the board could respond to what's happening in the marketplaces or to what we're seeing in the rural counties? So I think we're just at the start of this idea.
Chair Mandiela, if I could add just a little something to that.
Go ahead, Tom.
So you probably know, Laura, the feds, the CJA panel did a big survey, I think 2017 on this, and they raised their rates and then they tied them to like a CPI so that it goes up automatically every year. I think one of the problems with this rate, the way it's been, is there's only been 2 adjustments in the last 30 years, one in 1993 and one in 2003. And quite frankly, between the housing crisis meltdown and then COVID, there's not been any political will to do this, right? Like, I mean, we know indigent defense sort of falls at the low end of the funding priority spectrum. So, our 2 different ideas is, number one, track what the feds are doing, set it at that rate and tie it to CPI somehow in the statute so that it just goes up automatically every year. And we don't have to, marshal the political will to continue to do this. It just happens. And maybe we could include something for staff in there too. But then the second idea is, and I don't know which one would be, politically easier, but, the other one is the one Marcy mentioned, which is tie this or bring it in-house and have the board set it. And maybe we have to set some sort of similar guidelines and tie it to the same thing, a cost of living index.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
it's Joni Eastley,
Hi,
and
Joni.
I apologize for being late. We have some workmen inside our house, and I was tied up with them. Is it possible for us to include in statute that that we would set the rate, but not specify what the rate is? And could we just get the authority to change the rates through resolution?
Good question. Can I just make a comment here, guys? Looking from the county's perspective, my initial feeling it would not be good, for the board to set the rates, but knowing that the rate increases or would be covered under the regulations as far as maximum contribution, I don't think that any county would have a problem with that. So I think I would be on board with that. And then to your question, Joni, I'll direct that to Marcy.
Thank you, Chair. And I think, Joni, that's what we're trying to do, to increase the regulatory authority of this board so that this board is able to set that hourly rate by regulation. This idea actually popped up because we were talking to one of the legislators, and when we talked about the hourly rate, they're actually quite surprised that that's set by a statute. And we couldn't necessarily find very many rates, if any, that were set by statute. So we just felt it'd be more appropriate, this idea of bringing it in-house. But again, we have the other option of tying it to the cost or inflation.
You know, the other part of that too is that as you go out and you meet with the different counties on all aspects of their indigent services, defense services, you're going to hear information like that. I think one of the ones you're going to hear is the market demands a higher rate. And so with that in mind, that's information you bring back to the board and allows us to make those kinds of adjustments. So it kind of makes sense to me.
Chair Evan Lister has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some real concerns in this discussion. I would be highly opposed to setting on some sort of a continuous raise, CPI adjustment or whatever. The counties just can't sustain that. And I'm wondering about parity. Even though, yeah, okay, there's the idea that the state might kick in and cover that additional cost if we have to increase those hourly rates to our indigent defenders. Where are we going to get district attorneys? Because our district attorneys don't make anywhere near $100 an hour, or 125, or even 75, and they're covering all of the prosecution plus all of the other legal needs for the counties. I'm having some real struggles with this discussion, and I'll leave it at that.
I can answer that if you like, Chair.
Go ahead, Tom.
So just to clarify, this rate is the rate for appointed counsel. So this isn't salaried public defenders, which would be the equivalent of you're talking about district attorneys. This is the rate for conflict counsel and the like that are appointed outside of that system, and $100 an hour sounds like a lot, but that's not just money in their pocket. It's not like having a wage job where that's what you get paid. That has to cover all of the overhead, the assistants, payroll taxes, everything. And so we were recently talking with Judge Debrescu out in White Pine County, and he said, yeah, that rate is a pro bono rate. That's essentially pro bono. You can maybe pay your overhead with that, but it's not a lot of money in the pocket. The second thing is you mentioned parity, and we're actually doing a salary survey right now that will cover both the realm of organized public defender offices and contract public defenders, and compare that on parity with what prosecutors are making in that area. And as the Davis settlement requires, we have to look at that with an eye to the fact that these amounts have to cover, again, all of these overhead. The prosecutor's overhead is completely paid for, but not so much with these contract PDs. And so we were recently talking with a justice of the peace in another rural county who used to have one of these public defender contracts, and who said she figured it out at the end of her end of a year contract period, that after she paid her overhead, she made about $15 an hour. So it's sort of across the board in the rurals, at least, where both the salaries and this hourly rate are they're not sustainable, and it's a huge factor in why we're seeing a shortage of indigent defense lawyers across the state. So this is part of our mission, is to actually get some good data to adjust this with. Again, like I said, the feds, the Criminal Justice Act panel did this big nationwide 300-page study a few years ago. And, that's what I was referencing in the beginning. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any more on that.
And Chair, could I just add one more thing? Commissioner Lister, one thing that's been pointed out is the maximum contribution formula will kind of insulate the rural counties from any sort of increase. This board has set the maximum contribution for each of the rural counties. So any sort of increase like this of the hourly rate would be absorbed by the state if the county goes over their maximum contribution. And as we go into our further budget talk, we're going to talk about how much each of the counties are spending and where they're at. But I think that each county would have the protection built in because of this board's maximum contribution formula.
Well, and I appreciate that. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, to butt in. This is Bevan Lister again for the record. And I get that part of it. But on the other side, if any, to be honest, lawyers in rural communities are kind of few and far between, and if they can make far more working a part-time job than they would working as an elected official, where they have to go through the election process like a district attorney does, then potentially we have no candidates for district attorney. And so that's where the question of parity comes in, is at what point do we price ourselves out of having local elected officials? Sorry, and I'll leave it at that.
Yep, no, it's a good point, Commissioner. I'm not sure that that's anything that, at least from my perspective, this board can solve. That's one of those issues, but I think what came out of Davis, and then obviously part of the regulations that we deploy here, is that at the very least, I know in Humboldt County, our public defender, because he's been here 20 some years, was making as much as the district attorney. Not as much, but close. But the deputy district attorneys were making a lot more than our alternate public defenders. So we had to do some adjustments to get that in line. And so we've done that. So we're okay on that front. But I think, again, this is about those contract attorneys. So conflict attorneys. And, like I said, I think what we found here is that they're already very busy. But we've found a few that will take on that effort. So that's a good thing. But I recognize your point. It's an interesting one. Any other comments from anybody else? Go ahead, Drew.
Commissioner Mendel, just a comment from Clark County. We've been in discussions considering the topic that we're discussing. We'd have to think a little bit about whether we'd like this board and/or it to be a legislative decision. I think some members on this board may have conflicts with some of those discussions because of the fiscal impact it may have. I know the feds are currently at $155 an hour. I'm trying to determine what parameters they use to come up with that number. We've all kind of realized the $100 an hour has been there for over 2 decades, and it's not the same as it was 20 years ago. I'm not as comfortable tying it to CPI, but I'm open to the discussion about what's the best mechanism to move that number forward over time, similar to raises the institutional offices get. But I'm not ready to commit the mechanism by which it'd be legislative or this board. But I agree that the discussion needs to happen because it's kind of been stale for a number of years.
Thank you, Drew.
Chair, just
Sorry.
Just
Go
quickly.
ahead, Marcy.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom. You go first, Tom.
I dropped in the chat the PDF from the 2017 CJA study. And Drew, you're correct, except I think it went up to 158 this year. But that study, I think in 2017, they raised it up to 135, and then it's gone up with cost of living every year since then. But that can show you the source data, where what they did and where they pulled it from, for anyone that's interested in that.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
And Chair, may I just add to Drew's point that as we're going to discuss a little later on, we have re-signed a contract with Dr. Mitch Harrian, and part of what he's going to do is review overhead costs, similar to what was done with the federal system, and coming to that, how much does it actually cost for overhead, and what should an appropriate hourly rate be? So as we continue to have this conversation, hopefully we'll have an answer before it needs to be submitted. But as we continue to have this conversation, I think Dr. Harrian will be able to present us with some options so that this board can make the decision as to what seems to fit the best. So we'll have that option in the future.
That's good. Any other comments, questions?
Just
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Just quickly, in my mind, this is just absolutely key. And Marcy, you've told us about deadlines. I just would make sure that we have the ability, if a decision needs to be made by this board, we need more information. I totally agree with all that. And everything that's been brought up, makes a lot of sense, but I don't want to miss this deadline for the legislature. I know you're on it, you and your staff, Marcy, but please keep us on it. And if board members can help, like by a breakout, like a little subcommittee or whatever. I just see this, if we're not going to get people, working out in the rural counties unless we pay them something.
Yes, and we can
Hey, Laura, even when we can pay them something, we can't get them to come out here.
Right, and I'll also add to you, like, for example, we've been talking about this all morning here in Humboldt County with different job descriptions and classifications. And it all, goes back to what the market bears. Now, in our case, we look at counties of our size for similar jobs. In this particular case here, what we're really talking about is the comparison you're making is what is the level of fees in the marketplace. And again, the market's going to drive that. And CPI is a part of that, but that's really done by the individual private firms or individuals, right? So I don't know that that's a good way. I agree with Commissioner Lister. I don't think that's a great way. CPI is a great thing, but I don't know if there's any other way, because in the end, there's all those overhead and all those other factors that go into, what the cost of doing business is and what individuals, will work for, because that's what it comes down to. We've got to be able to pay them, and it's got to be worth their time to come do that. And so I guess for the sake of this discussion, where I was trying to go with that, is that we probably, I personally think that we ought to have the authority to set at least some parameters or minimums for that. I would agree with that. How we do it, I think we can figure that out later. For the sake of this, if we just take these first three proposals for the BDR and modify these, maybe we can just discuss that so that we can meet the timeframes that Marcy's under. Does that make sense? Okay, so Marcy, how would you like us to, do we want to do it in the form of a motion for these three? Oops,
So I would ask, I have a couple that are non-budgetary, so I think we could proceed with them now. The changes that I think are non-budgetary in here and are due May 20th are to change NRS 180.320 subsection F to make recommendations to the executive director rather than review and approve. And then also to allow those changes to NRS 180.410, which say that my duties are to establish the proposed budget and remove language that says I'm supposed to submit it to the board for approval, because again, that's inconsistent with NRS 353.205, which says the budget is confidential and I cannot show it to you until the governor releases it. So I would ask for permission to submit those non-budgetary, but I agree that we should hold off on the other changes until we get more information. And those are not due until September 1st.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. So does everybody understand that? And does anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make
I
a
think-
motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion, Chair, just to consistent with what Marcy said, go forward those non-budgetary bill drafts. We're all meeting, I think, live in Tonopah in a couple of months. It'd be a good time to maybe plan some breakout sessions. We'll have some more information before then to kind of continue the discussion on the budgetary. For purposes of the motion, my motion is to follow Marcy's lead as to the progression or at least the decisions about what bills to go forward now.
I second that.
Okay, I got a first and a second from Laura. Any other questions about that motion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. We'll go forward on those and then we'll hold off on the other one for the time being. Marcy, you want to move on to the next one?
Yes, so I'll go through the next three because I don't know if there'll be much discussion. The next that we'd like to make changes to is NRS 7.145, which says that bills must not be paid unless they're submitted within 60 days. We are proposing to modify that timeline to 90 days or unless otherwise permitted by the county. The reasoning for this is as we've taken over the review of this billing, we've had some attorneys as they're closing their practice see cases that they maybe forgot to bill for that were outside the 60-day time frame. We, of course, submitted them to the county and the county agreed to pay them, but they weren't required to because of the timeline. So we are asking for permission to increase that timeline from 60 to 90 days, which seems to be more consistent to give them additional time for billing. The next area that we propose to make the changes to is NRS 180.500. This is our grants budget account where if we get grants or gifts, it has language in there that we are required to put funds received as a grant into our grant account. We would like to make that be permissive with a may instead of a must. We've run into issues where we received funding and it would have been easier for us to put it into our general account. But because we had that required language of a must, we had to put it into our grants account, which created a few issues. So the governor's finance office did make the recommendation we should modify this in our statute. And then the final one, which I think we could talk about, is we want to add a confidentiality statute, which clearly sets forth language that records or information received by the department, board, or designee relating to an attorney's client, attorney-client file, attorney funding requests, or anything that would have been otherwise protected by the attorney-client privilege is also confidential for public records request. We also want to extend this to complaints that the board receives, that those could also be confidential, except as may be necessary for the performance of our oversight functions of the Department of Indigent Defense Services. And then finally, a release that if we need to cooperate with a licensing board or any other agency, that we are allowed to do so. So we're requesting those three non-budgetary BDRs be submitted as well, or would request feedback on those.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. Any questions from the board? Those are pretty straightforward. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to recommend the changes Marcy described to the non-budgetary items to go forward in the form of a BR from the Board of Indigent.
I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, Drew, thank you. Got a first and a second. Again, 3 BDR changes for non-budgetary items. Everybody understand the motion? If so, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody against? Any nays? Seeing none, that passes. Marcy, what do you got next?
The next is talking about NRS 180.320, and this talks about deputies of the Nevada State Public Defender. It has been proposed or requested that this board submit a bill draft request to allow the private practice of law for part-time deputy public defenders in the Nevada State Public Defender's Office. I'd like to note that such private practice is currently allowed in county public defender offices pursuant to NRS 260.040 subsection 4. Just following up from our oversight, a lot of the feedback that we've received is in some of these counties, a full-time deputy public defender might not be warranted. And some of these rural counties are struggling with attorneys to come in that can take family law cases, 432B cases, or any sort of other civil matter. So the idea has been proposed that having the state public defender come into these rural counties might be more realistic if the counties would like to do that, if the state public defenders that are deputies are also allowed to do private practice and pick up in some of these other areas. So that's been proposed by some of the rural counties. Tom, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that, but this is just feedback that we've received and we're submitting it to the board.
You covered it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. Any questions about this particular BDR?
I have a question. So you're talking about a full-time deputy state public defender going out, like, let's just say to Winnemucca, not a county that, you know, another county, and getting state retirement, getting all of the benefits and still being able to have private practice. I mean, I hate to be a suspicious human being, but I'm a little concerned they might short their PD's caseload in favor of, you know, getting the hourly. I mean, I just have to say it. This is a surprise.
And Laura, I don't disagree. I think the way that it's written is that it has to be a non-full-time employee, so a part-time employee. There are some rural counties out there that have very small caseloads, and I don't know if they would warrant a full public defender. So although it would be a public defender that would be employed, it would be a part-time public defender or a 3/4 time public defender, and they would be expected to work that appropriate amount of hours. They would have a full-time supervisor that would be watching over to make sure they're complying. But we just wanted to throw the option out there. This is just what we've received in feedback, so we're presenting it to the board.
Chair, if I could just add one thing to that.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom.
So it's sort of, Laura, I guess maybe akin, it goes under the rubric of parity. For instance, we were just out in White Pine, and this is one of the counties where there's a concern about just the number of competent attorneys in general. The DA's office is, the deputy DAs are all allowed to have their own private practice as long as they don't conflict with their official duties there. And so some of the feedback that we received from district judges there was that they think that maybe the inability to practice, to have any kind of private practice is an impediment to getting competent public defenders out there. So again, you know, to echo what Marcy said, this wouldn't be, you know, full-time positions. This would be places where maybe there's not full-time work just doing that. It would, you know, there's a number of places that it would be helpful. We were in Pahrump recently, and we were talking with the district judge about separating 432Bs from the public defender contracts. And they were just like, well, who else are we going to get to do this? There's like a tiny handful of other competent lawyers that live
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
So, I think it's to address some of that. And likewise, I do hear your concern, and one of the reasons why we're collecting data on private caseloads is, to address that concern in Davis, that they're sort of neglecting their indigent defense duties in favor of private money. So there is a tension there.
Thank you, Tom. Hey, Laura, before I go to you, I'm going to go to Joni Eastley. I think I heard you step in there. Joni, do you have any thoughts about this?
No, I just agree. I agree with what the district, I don't know which district court judge you were talking to, if it was Judge Wonker or Judge Lane, but I agree with them.
Thank you. Laura, go ahead.
Is this something we could put off till, we've got a lot going on. I don't know enough. My gut, it was just a gut reaction, and thank you guys for bringing forward all of your comments. But I'm just thinking, could we see what we're talking about and do this maybe next session? Not have to do this now, and actually be able to, in order to support this and to make maybe the board comfortable or whoever, actually have a, for example, this is the situation here. To me, it just seems like, we got to do a little triage on bills. We have a lot coming up. I would just, obviously, it's just a suggestion. It's not a motion. And I defer to the people that are out in the rural counties dealing with this. But I would suggest we wait and see how everything else is doing, and then see if we need, because this is in certain ways a big change. And if it's warranted, I just don't know.
Thank you, Laura. Marcy, your thoughts on that in terms of timing?
And I think it could also be a great idea to hold off. We are expecting the NCSC weighted caseload study to tell us how many attorneys would be needed in each of these rural counties. If there's many rural counties that are coming out where only half an attorney is needed, maybe we could discuss it at that point, but we're open to feedback from the board, and we can table this as well. And Chair, I see Harriet Cummings has her hand up. I don't know if you can see that.
Okay, yeah, unless there's somebody in opposition to the idea of tabling this, speak up now. Otherwise, I think we should do that. So I'll
No, I support it. This is Joni Eastley. I support Laura's recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't we table this for the time being? We'll bring that back up at the June meeting. All right, go ahead, Marcy. Anything more?
The final changes have to do with prison cases. We wanted to ensure that we're providing for prompt payment of appointed counsel in prison cases by moving funding for such representation into the state public defender budget. Right now, that funding is set aside in a different account, which isn't within our budget. So when attorneys submit their billing, we have to submit it to the finance office, and it takes a period of time for them to be reimbursed for that payment. So I'd like to recommend modifying the language, which we did. We requested this last legislative session, but it didn't move forward, to allow those funds to come into the state public defender's office so that we could promptly reimburse those attorneys. The second, which is again open to discussion, is for state prisons that are located within a county having a population of less than 100,000 people, to move the venue for prosecuting such prison cases under NRS 212.070 to Carson City, Nevada. The thinking behind this is the state public defender is required to have an office within Carson City, Nevada. And what we're seeing is a lot of these cases from the prisons are happening in White Pine, where Ely State Prison, the maximum security prison, is. And White Pine is having an issue with indigent defense providers. Many of these cases coming out are high category A because they're murder cases. And there's a shortage of individuals that are able to take these cases. We felt that by possibly moving the venue to Carson City, we wouldn't have that issue of who is going to cover these cases if there isn't any sort of available attorneys within White Pine County. So again, what we're recommending or what we're considering is in NRS 7.155 to add language that says that certain funds go into the state public defender's office. Currently, there's funding for post-conviction petition for habeas corpus to be paid out of that fund, and would like to add language that proceedings related to representation of a prisoner under NRS 212.070 also get moved into that fund for prompt payment. Would like to clarify in NRS 212.070 that the expenses for prosecuting and defending a prisoner are an expense against the state or a charge against a state and must be paid from the money appropriated to the Office of the State Public Defender pursuant to NRS 7.155. And then finally, we would like to add language stating that the venue for prosecuting any person for escaping from or breaking out of a prison or attempting to do so, or for the commission of any crime while a prisoner therein, for state prisons located within a county of having a population of less than 100,000 is Carson City, and for all other state prisons is the county in which the prison is located. And just to back this up with one more thing, with our data collection, what we're seeing is in Pershing County, the Pershing County Public Defender's Office is covering these prison cases at the expense of Pershing County. They're not asking for any sort of reimbursement. And then the other county with the large amount of cases coming out of it is White Pine, again, where we're suffering from that shortage of indigent defense providers. So those are some ideas that we've kicked around, but we're open to input on those.
And thank you, Marcy. Does anybody have any questions about those proposed changes? Go ahead, Laura. I think you got your finger up there.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm getting blowback, but it's not, you guys hearing my blowback or is it just me? Okay,
No.
Marcy. I don't know who else you've talked to about this. I think you would have an ally in the AG's office probably, right? Because don't they prosecute the cases? So because but I can't imagine that Carson City's going to be happy with this. The judges and the first JD, and also the prison because of transport and housing and shuffling. Have you thought of, and you might have said this and I may have missed it, is it better to take the Mountain to Muhammad or whatever that is and take the state PDs, put in a budget thing in the state PD, but then have them go out? If the AG's office is prosecuting, the state PD should defend rather than the individual indigent defenders in those counties. Did you already suggest that?
That's the other option at this point in time. Because of the shortage, the state public defender's office has actually taken one case on that was a murder case. And we're hoping to be able to build in additional personnel there, but that's related to the 48-hour hearings and if there's sufficient time to be able to handle these prison cases. As for your discussion, we've started discussions with the Attorney General's office to see if they would be open to this idea. We do need to approach the First Judicial, and I know that the state is actually being charged by the Seventh Judicial for each of these trials. So it may be financially a savings for the state if everything is localized in one spot. And the other problem is that if we move a public defender to White Pine County, who is going to fill that position? Because we currently don't have a position there. So we don't know if we're going to be able to, I mean, that's a question that's unanswered at this point in time. Is an individual interested in moving to White Pine County to take a position at the public defender's office? So we wanted to just start having this discussion. Again, this is just a discussion point to start off which direction the board would like us to go.
Thank you, Marcy. I think that's, what Laura described was what was on my mind with respect to just transfer of those prisoners. That's usually a big issue. Even to do it 60 miles up the road here in Humboldt County. So I would want to know, where the, whether it's the sheriff's office or the folks that do that, the prison that would be that transport, where they sit on that. And then the other piece, of course, is like you said, it makes more sense just on the surface to have the public defender go to the prison, but I don't know. But I think good points, Laura. Thank you. Anybody else got any thoughts on this issue?
Chair Jonell had her hand up just earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there you are, Joe. Go ahead.
Hi. I wonder about capital representation. If it's a killing within the prison, those are often death penalty cases. And are you going to have people who meet the qualifications to handle those in some of the smaller jurisdictions? I think you're also going to run into some venue issues with, if the prison's a big part of a small community, finding a jury in those cases might be difficult as well. And I would just urge you to think about those factors when you're making a decision on this.
Very good point. Thank you. Does anybody else have comments, questions? Okay, if not, Marcy, want to just table that for the time being? Come back to it?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is that the last of them there, Marcy? I think it is, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do we need a motion on any of that? No? Okay. Very good then. So I guess next we're going to move to item number 7, and that's the budget, which has kind of come up here a few times in the previous items, but I'll turn it over to you, Marcy.
So we have some good news. We actually reimbursed some of the Davis counties in this week. So we were able to go in front of the Interim Finance Committee on April 7th, 2022, and they approved a request for $26,360. This is pursuant to this board's maximum contribution formula. And if this board can recall, this board stated a certain amount that the maximum contribution that a county will make is fiscal year 18 and 19, the average of those plus inflation. We also set aside that if a rural county in their plan for the provision of indigent defense services made an option for attorneys to request expert or case-related expenses, such as expert investigators that did not go through the judiciary, that the maximum contribution for those case-related expenses would also be $0. So what we're seeing here is the reporting of case-related expenses. In Douglas County, and this is Davis County's first, in Douglas County, there was $5,055 in case-related expenses. Lyon County, $19,589, and White Pine, $1,716. The remaining Davis counties did not report any case-related expenses for that quarter. For the non-Davis counties, Carson City reported a request of $2,373, and Humboldt reported $6,587. In order to request those funds, we have attended BOE, and we've moved through, which was approved in April, and we believe that will be scheduled for a June IFC. So we've made it through BOE on that, but we're waiting on IFC. We've also closed out Q3 reporting, and with this third quarter, some counties actually have met their maximum contribution. The following counties have met the maximum contribution. They are Eureka, Lyon, Mineral, and White Pine. Other Davis counties that haven't met their maximum but still have case-related expenses are Douglas, Lincoln, and Nye. So we have prepared a work program in the amount of $352,919, requesting that it be placed on the Interim Finance Committee agenda so we can request reimbursement for those expenses. As for the non-Davis counties, none of the non-Davis counties have met their maximum contribution. but they have reported case-related expenses, and their total for the case-related expenses is $92,176. We have submitted a request to attend BOE in the hopes that we'll go on to interim finance to be able to reimburse those funds. The deadline for the work programs was yesterday, so we did submit those to meet the timeline of the work program. The final work program, which we've submitted, is to request the remainder of the approximately $1.2 million that was set aside for those Davis counties. I've provided kind of a breakdown of the reporting so far of what's been spent on indigent defense services and where we think the fourth quarter will go. With the reporting that we've received so far, we think that $1.2 million is going to be exhausted by the fourth quarter. So we're requesting to be placed on that June IFC to request the remainder of that, so that we'll have those funds in our department budget so we can reimburse the counties at the end of that fourth quarter. So those are our pending work programs at this point.
Thank you, Marcy. Are there any questions or comments?
Well,
Go ahead, Laura.
sorry, I swear, well, I'm not going to be there in June, so I'm only hogging this meeting. Marcy, I want to really commend you and your staff. You know, I'm hearing this and you put it so succinctly. The amount of work that's gone into you getting to this point is incredible. Work and patience. And I also want to say, I'm hopeful that as we proceed with what you've been doing into next year and the following year, that the rural counties, I think rightfully, you know, having been involved in this, not as long as some of you, but feels like forever, you know, there was a real credibility issue with the rural counties because we're saying, oh, we're going to do all this stuff and you're not going to have to pay more. And legitimately, there was suspicion about that. And I think that over time, what you're doing now and what you're going to be doing going forward, you know, will really make a difference for how we interact with the rural counties and most importantly for the delivery of indigent defense services. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Let me just mirror those comments. That was one of my lead public defender who's been around a long time, had a lot of bad feelings about the previous effort by the state public defender's office. And I was telling Marcy and Tom that he has come so far mainly because of the work that you all have done. He now gets it, and he really does feel like that your department is putting in place all of the things that really do need to be done to make sure that we're providing the very best defense for these indigent clients. So hats off to you guys. Yeah, he's very impressed. I think I told you that. And he yells at first and gets mad because he thinks it's a state takeover. And then after he listens to the reasoning behind it and the efforts you've made, he's been very pleased. So I would agree with Laura on that. Any other comments out there or questions? Okay, if we have none on that, let's move on to the budget kickoff. You want to go to that, Marcy?
Yes, so we are starting to build our budget as we talk. And as we've discussed before, the budget is confidential. So if there's any recommendations of what you would like to see in the budget, I don't know if we can start to have that discussion. Some overviews of what we're hoping to do are to provide similar resources to our rural public defenders of what we have in the urban offices. One of the big pushes that we're hoping to build within our budget is something called a holistic resource center. We see that in Clark County, they have mitigation specialists, they have social workers, they have a lot of staff to be able to provide in-house these resources to their clients that a lot of the rural public defenders don't have. What we're proposing to build is a holistic resource center within our department where we have a head coordinator that can make contact with the mental health and the specialty courts throughout the rural counties and throughout Clark and Washoe to really learn who the providers are, who are the treatment providers, where can we send these individuals. Would also like to have social workers that are on staff. We went to a meeting the other day and it was talking about who do you think a person is going to open up to the most with social workers? Right now, prosecutors have social workers, courts have social workers, but public defenders in the rural counties, other than Elko, they don't have social workers. But social workers that are within a public defender's office are covered by that attorney-client confidentiality. So if an individual opens up to the court, they may face punishment. If they open up to that social worker for the probation officer or the prosecutor, they're likely going to face some sort of charges. But if they open up to one of our public defenders, social workers, they're going to get help. So that's really what we can do if we start providing this resource to our rural attorneys that already is available in these urban counties. We want to provide them with that same resource. So we're hoping to provide them with those social workers. We'd like to also provide them with investigators that can be shared amongst all of the rural counties. We're hoping to highlight, if you look at the quarterly reporting, if you look at the offices like the Nevada State Public Defender that have 2 investigators on staff, the amount of time that is spent investigating these criminal cases is far higher than any other rural county. And similarly, if we have social workers on staff, check out Elko County's public defender's time. Their expert time their social workers' time is under expert, and you can see that it's one of the highest throughout all of the counties, the amount of time that they're spending there. Some of the counties don't feel comfortable at this time adding the staff within their rural offices or within these contracts that they have. So that's what we're hoping to build within our budget, is that holistic resource center to provide them with these resources so we can provide the same level of care that's provided in Washoe and Clark County. What we're really trying to do is see if we can get to the table in the opioid discussion of those funds that are coming in. What are they going to be doing with that opioid funding? Can they start supporting or providing funding for this holistic resource center? Because again, we think that the most effective person to be able to help an addict is their public defender. The public defender is the first person that sees them. The public defender is the one that needs to tell the judge that this person has the problem, and the public defender needs to be the one asking for help. So if we can really provide these resources to our rural public defenders, then hopefully we can fight this opioid epidemic and have a good outcome. The second that we would like to build is that complex litigation unit. We've talked about this previously, bringing in individuals that can handle those complex cases. Like Jonelle pointed out, who's going to handle those death penalty cases in the rural counties? Would like to be able to have staff that can go out when needed to go assist. Would like to also be able to have staff, because it's not just death penalty cases that are hard. There's also complex cases, financial, white collar crimes that aren't the run of the mill, that would like to be able to provide resources to these public defenders of someone that can help them go through the discovery and figure out what they should do in possible defenses. So that's the complex litigation unit that we'd like to build. Again, when we're reaching out to these rural counties, we're receiving a lot of positive feedback for the idea of going with the state public defender for appeals. We're hoping to lighten the trial attorney's caseload, where they can hopefully pass on that appeal to the state public defender for coverage. So we're working with the state public defender to see what options they have available that they could offer each of the rural counties. That's not necessarily a full opt-in to the office, but it's still some sort of reduction in the workload that those trial attorneys are facing. So those are what we're putting forward on our budget in the hopes to build when we're building it. And just a quick pause, I have it later on, but we have Jamie Hamtack with us. You guys all may recall that Jason Colnett was our management analyst, and he's left us to go on to a different position. And Jamie Hamtack has taken his place. So we'll be working with Jamie to be able to build our budget, but that's the vision of where our department is hoping to go in the future. But as always, we're open to any sort of feedback.
Thank you, Marcy. And first of all, welcome, Jamie. Great to have you on the team and look forward to working with you. You're on mute, case you want to say something.
I don't think she has a microphone.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much. Any questions from the board or thoughts on Marcy's proposals for the budget? So I'll go ahead and just make one comment. I love the idea of actually all three, but the one that steps out for me is the Holistic Resource Center. Again, in the rurals, it's difficult right now to find the kinds of, whether it's caseworkers or social workers or whatever we need, it's difficult. And those that we do have here are so booked and overworked, it's a difficult prospect. So any help that we can get, as a matter of fact, that's thank you, Washoe County, and Kate Thomas helped us out recently with some issues along those lines. And by the way, Kate, that has worked out quite well. I think we're going to engage with those folks. So thank you. So yeah, I like that idea a lot. And the complex litigation, same thing. Those are important things to the rurals where, again, we just don't see it, a lot of these complex ones, but every once in a while. Now, we're fortunate in Humboldt County because I've got a guy that's been around 28 years doing it, but he'll be gone soon. He'll be retiring. So I like the idea. Anybody else?
And Dave, how do you replace those people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just, I think there's ways of doing it. And I think I'm finding that people will come. It goes back to our discussion of wages and salary and compensation as a whole. They'll come, but there's not a lot of them in the pool. But anyway, anybody else? Any other comments? Okay. Do we want to get a motion on that to approve going forward on that front? Do we need that, Marcy?
Well, I think pursuant to the statute, the board is supposed to approve our budget, but again, it's confidential. So I think this is what we did last year, where it was a general discussion of where we were going with approval, so we could meet both the statutes. I don't know if you're willing to do something similar.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever you'd like me to do. I mean, if everybody's fine with a general thought, doesn't sound like anybody's opposed to it. So I would say go forward. Okay. Looks like next up, we've got training and externship update from Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Hey, I don't know what other people's time commitments here are. I'm wondering if you want to go back to number 4 while we've still got a quorum. Otherwise, I'll move forward.
I think you already did that, Tom.
We already did that one. We got that.
Sorry. Somehow I missed that. All right. Number 8, training and our externship update. This is actually Peter Handy's realm, but he is in the cabinet meeting right now. So I'm going to take this over. Our second annual conference is scheduled in Las Vegas for May 26th and 27th. This will be our second conference, but our first live one. We're going to provide 11 hours of CLE credit for attendees. And our scheduled speakers include Justice Hardesty, Chief Judge Bell, Doctors Cord and Lasky, and a producer from the podcast of In the Dark, which has to do with investigation and high-profile cases. It's 2 social events planned on Wednesday night. There will be a get-together at the Supreme Court courthouse that will be hosted, I think, by NACJ, Marcy, is that correct? And then the second one will be Thursday night, which will be after dinner at the Mob Museum. And then the Mob Museum has a little speakeasy down underneath. We're really excited about this because one of our big goals is, building this statewide coalition. And as we've discussed, there's nothing like being face to face with people to form those relationships. So we're pretty excited about getting everybody together under one roof, learning some things and having some fun. Currently, there were 31 applicants for the Rural Practitioner Scholarship that we received a grant for through the JAG Burn grant funds. Let's see, there's still spots, so eligible applicants are encouraged to continue to apply. So far, our registration is at 38. Again, this is mostly rural attorneys. We're expecting that number to grow as we get closer to the date. And we're capping it at 100 people. We understand that Clark County, Darren and Jonelle and Jordan are all going to recruit locally there. So we're probably going to, be in a sellout situation for that. Anyway, we're excited about that. Our trainings, we had a training in April on client intake interviews, and we have right now more training scheduled for June on settlement conferences, July on mitigation and or advanced investigations. August will be investigating the scene of an alleged crime, and October will be working or not working with the media, tips on that. Let's see, we also have, we've filled both externship spots. So we, just to remind you, we received a grant for 2 Boyd law students to do externships in organized public defender's office each this summer and next summer. And so we filled those 2 spots. Matt Pennell was on the call earlier, but he's the head of the Elko PD's office. So the Elko PD's office got one of them, and then the Nevada State Public Defender's Office got the other. So we're excited about that. And then we actually got 2 interns in our office for the summer, and they'll probably be helping us with some of the BDR work that you heard earlier and in tracking bills in the legislature. I think that's all I have on that. Any questions?
Thank you, Tom. Any questions from anybody on training and the externship? Very good. That sounds like a good training down in Las Vegas and some opportunities for some of those folks to get to know each other. So that's good. I guess we'll move on to 9 now, update on the department, then I'll turn it over to Marcy.
And I think we've kind of covered this. Like we said, we re-upped the contract with Dr. Mitch Harrion. He is going to be doing that salary survey for our public defenders to determine what is a reasonable salary. We've said in our regulations that public defenders should receive that reasonable salary, but we haven't specifically said what it is. So he's going to be determining or trying to make a recommendation to this board as to what that should be. He's also reviewing what the hourly rate should be as well. He will be working on pipeline possibilities. First, he's going to determine, is there a shortage of public defenders in the rural counties? And if there are, what sort of pipelines would work for the state of Nevada to try and encourage individuals to come to Nevada and to our rural counties? And then finally, he is going to look at our oversight process and assist us with determining, with our short amount of staff, since we only have 7 employees, how can we really provide effective oversight for the entire state of Nevada, and then ultimately making recommendations in that area. So those are the 3 areas which we've contracted with him for. So he'll hopefully be making some recommendations at our June meeting in Tonopah. And I've already introduced Jamie. So we're on to the next.
Very good. Item 10, scheduling of future meetings. We've got the June 16, 2022 meeting in Tonopah. That'll start at 1 p.m. And I will also say, if you haven't made your reservations, please do so. Also, I think Cindy needed to know whether or not you needed to be in reimbursed. So if anybody has that request, make sure you get out to Cindy, let her know on that. And anything else on that front, Marcy?
I would just add that we do have funding to be able to reimburse our board members for their travel and their room and board. So please let us know ahead of time if you do need to have that reimbursement so we can prepare the travel forms. And there's 2 areas which I believe we've contacted, the Belvada and the Mizpah, where you can choose to stay. So we're asking that even if you're asking for reimbursement, that you make your room reservation and then submit your bill to us afterwards so that we can process the reimbursement.
Okay, very good. Any questions on that? Don't see any here. Okay, so I'll move on to public comment. Any public comment?
Mr. Chair, it's Joni Eastley. I have one question. I saw the email from Cindy, and thank you, Cindy, for sending that with the written public comment. Was there any mention made of that at the beginning of the meeting? If so, I missed that.
Yes,
And were we going to respond to that, or how do we handle that?
we didn't talk about that. So Marcy, if you want to respond to that, we did bring it up that we had received the public comment.
We have received the public comment, and Kate Thomas did have a response to that. Kate, did you want to update that to the board?
Sure, I can just let everybody know. We, because it was pertaining to our office, I reached out to the public defender's office as far as what Mr. Clark was mentioning, and his case was dismissed in our district court. And just so we all know, just our public defender's office had on multiple occasions provided him all of his file, his complete file through many public information requests and the discovery process that was related to the lawsuit. So just so you guys know that in the spirit of open communication, that's our position.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll adjourn this meeting at 2:32 p.m. And everybody have a great rest of your day and weekend.
Congratulations, Dave.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
We got through it. You survived.